Alrighty, everyone. So, welcome to the first YSI Live. We're going to do this every week, with COVID and kind of school talks ending. And kind of what we do at YSI, we want to have these weekly lives. We're going to bring in these really cool young innovators and people doing amazing stuff. And there's none other than Mr. Cyril Manny, who is an absolute legend, in my opinion. And let's just wait for him to join. I'll invite him again. Let's welcome Mr. Cyril Manny.
Let me turn it around. Oh, hello.
The man himself.
How's everyone going?
Drop some hearts in the chat for our 6 beautiful fans right now. Let's show some love to Mr. Cyril Manny.
Changing the world 1/9 at a time.
1/9 at a time. I like that.
It's amazing.
I think we should just get started. I see you in your dungeon of innovation. It looks like that's where all the ideas happen.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I can give you a tour. So actually behind me, I have my science fair posters of CWSF of 2019. So it can give you an idea. You have the rockets I've designed when I was 18, sort of my whole scientific process here, the pictures of my work. This is the equation that I use for my rocket fuel. And on the side, on the top here is my first rocket prototype. The solid rocket booster that I made. And under here is actually behind these crates of, this is actually a cooler pack of styrofoam that I'm going to use to make a weather balloon to go and film some high altitude science there. And you need to insulate your electronics at that altitude. And this is my research poster that I finished last summer. For a rotating detonation engine, so for a more advanced type of rocket engine. So yeah, it's my temple of work, I'd say. This is my window.
That's a sick room. I can just imagine, like, if you were like raided by the FBI and they just come in this room and they're like, "What is going on here?" Like it's like some next Elon Musk type stuff.
It would be hard to explain, for sure. Actually, I'll come over it in a bit because I know that's something that we want to talk about. But I have some good stories about what science fair made me do. And
100%.
Yeah.
I think between the both of us, we've both gotten ourselves in some very interesting experiences, to say the least. So yeah, no, this can be a fun live. But before we get started, I guess kind of tell everyone what you're up to now, what you're studying, and kind of your role at YSI currently is.
Yeah, so I'm in mechanical engineering with a minor in aerospace. You've guessed by my background. At McGill University, I'm in my 2nd year, and I am currently working on a few projects. I am developing a hybrid rocket engine with the McGill rocket team. It's the first experimental rocket engine made by students. I'm also designing a weather balloon to go do some high altitude science. I just got good news for an internship this summer. I'll be working at Reaction Dynamics to build the first space launch system in Canada. So we're going to have our first rocket in Canada, like the USA, like SpaceX. We have our own, and it's called Reaction Dynamics. So yeah.
That's incredible. And what do you do at YSI for the people who don't know and are just getting introduced to what we do?
Yeah, that part of the question. I am director of community outreach. So the point of YSI is to build this community, right, where we're going to provide and support and provide opportunities, support students, and empower them in their quest to, try out and develop their competencies in STEM. And the important part is to have this community to start with. And my role here is to build and entertain and sort of construct this community in a way that is sustainable and that can help sustain itself in the long run.
Yeah, and people might not know the amount of work you do, but it's truly incredible. And I remember when we did the 3D printing of the face shields. I've never seen a man's phone, get more notifications than this guy right here, whether it be in like the middle of the night, just nurses, calling him up and yeah, no, Cyril definitely is the best man for that. And he's kind of like on the other end. I think that's why we complement each other so well. You're in engineering mostly. I'm more on like the translational medical biochem side. I'm currently studying at Concordia in kinesiology, clinical exercise physiology. It's working on like exercise and seeing how we can treat disease populations. And I'm really interested in like neurorehabilitation. And unlike rockets, I'm working on kind of trying to detect neurodegenerative diseases in a non-invasive manner. So I'm kind of working on developing this molecular probe for the early diagnosis and treatment of different neurodegenerative diseases. So it's like a carbon dot bound antibody. So that's kind of what
Nice.
we're up to. And I know we covered a bit about like our mission on kind of sharing opportunities and community and bringing this community of change makers together. Because I think for you and I, we were fortunate to have had, science fairs or kind of like hackathons and build a community with that, meet like-minded individuals. That's how I met you and a lot of our other good friends. And that's kind of what we try to do at YSI. But let us like kind of let the viewers know what other kind of programs or what are we trying to do with this kind of in the coming years.
So we actually have coming up in a couple of weeks, and we'll be able to provide the exact dates on a post on the YSI Instagram. But we organize conferences in which we have speakers that have been through the science fair program and can sort of go over the advantages and disadvantages and the best ways to use this program to build a career in STEM. And YSI acts as a sort of organizational mentor to these people that are interested into the science fairs by organizing these conferences where people can meet, can talk to each other, and talk to our speakers, which have extensive experience in the science fair program. And I can tell you about some of the people that are going to be there in March that I'm going to talk about and talk with. For example, my good friend Brian Wu, which I think is actually in this call, got a chance to discover exoplanets through his work for the Regeneron Science Fair, which she was a finalist for. And so the point of this is really to allow and sort of make a case for science fairs within the STEM younger population and try to convince more people to get involved with them and give them advice on how they can, sort of progress and be successful in that sphere. And we do that by mentoring them through a network of an extensive network of professionals and people like us that have been through it and that know how to perform in the best possible way.
Yeah, and if you're interested in that, if you're watching this, it's a 2-day conference. The one that Cyril and Brian are gonna have a nice fireside chat on, will be on March 7th, I believe. And the first day of that conference will actually be February 26th. So you can definitely go on our website, ysigroup.org, and register for that. And there should be like a form that you can see the speakers and whatnot. And yeah, no, you said it perfectly. It's really that talent is everywhere, but opportunities are not. And I think that's kind of the main goal of what we're trying to do and achieve. And we kind of touched upon it, but how we met was pretty funny. I don't know if I want to see how you remember it, but I remember it was at the Provincial Science Fair in 2019.
Yeah.
In the South Shore of Montreal, provincials, and I remember you were in the alley or the aisle behind me, but I remember like having people come up to my booth and I'm like, what project should I see? And everyone said yours. And I was like, okay, I kept on hearing this guy's name. What is this guy all about, right? He's like, oh, this guy built the rockets, transported something, and built his own rocket fuel. I'm like, who the heck is this guy over here? And I ended up coming to your project. And I'm like, oh crap, this guy's amazing. Like, he's building rockets out of his basement. So that's
I
how we
remember
met. But
that.
honestly,
I
like, how
remember
do you
you.
remember it?
I remember you coming to my booth, and I've heard of your project, and I've seen all the people go directly to yours, and we were actually in front of the entrance, so people would go to
Right.
yours and would go to mine directly, and it was. It was a French-speaking science fair, and I knew you were Anglophone, and so I don't know, man. I was just intimidated, and when you were there, I was trying to give my best presentation, but I would keep reminding myself, being like, "Yo, this guy is like legit," and I've already had like talks to build helmets commercially with Bauer. Bauer? How do you say it?
Yeah, I went into their testing facility up in St. Jerome Bower. Yeah.
Bauer, yeah. And so I don't know. I had so much feedback from other people that it was kind of intimidating to talk to you. And actually, I thought you were kind of a jock because I knew you were a big lacrosse guy, and I was like, who is this dude? And we ended up going. I think yeah, it was at the provincial, and we ended up going to Lena to check out planes or stuff. And I remember you were behind me, and my friend Steph Lou was talking with you. And I was like, oh, maybe he's not that bad. And you're like, oh, I'm a dachshund. I do like cuss. And like, I was like, how is this kid, this like, this really this sporty guy, and in such a nerdy event? Like, how does it match? And Brian is there. Yeah, so it was just a shock. And then I ended up knowing more about you, and clearly a great guy. And we've just went from there to do more events together and organize this beautiful group that is YSI. And from there on, you sort of join forces with this community, and that's the first time that um, we saw YSI perform in what it is today. When we had the COVID pandemic, and you sort of brought all this man and brain power together to find a solution and to make to help Montreal, and we were able to find to test medication on simulations, to develop a full from scratch, a full mechanical ventilator, an automated system with Ricky that's also here, and
Shout out
Brian.
Ricky
Shout out
and
Ricky
Brian and Brian.
and Brian, yeah, and we got to just develop this thing from scratch. And so that's when we saw the power of YSI, and just working with you to get the Canadian Space Agency on board to 3D print some face shields for the Jewish hospital, and just the stress of knowing that like we were the only suppliers of PPE equipment to a hospital for a good like 4 days, and that I could like rely on you to like drive us to organize this, to get us the contacts we needed. It was fantastic, and we made a lot of friends on the way.
Yeah, and I think that was like it was like a prime example of like the power of the science for community. I could say the same for you. I remember first off, no one likes the Montreal kids at provincials, and I'm very
Yeah.
like I'm knowledgeable of that. But you're the only one who was like nice to me, so thank you for that. But no, I remember that our trip to in whatever the airplane place, and that was definitely the first time we chilled, and the other Montreal people, the French Montreal was kind to us, MRSDF people. But yeah, no, we definitely had some fun times and long nights for the that ventilator and face shields. I think my best memory from that, although our hands got destroyed, I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah.
I remember waking up at like it was like 5 a.m. or something. We had a limit at the Jewish General Hospital that we had to meet at 8 a.m. So we're like, okay, I'm gonna pick you up at like 5 a.m. and then
Yeah.
and we pulled up and yeah, no, that was definitely crazy.
Yeah, and we essentially just stripped plastic off of face shields for a good 3 hours, and got there completely drained, but we had like something like 175 face shields for the nurses. And I remember we were in the lobby, right? And people needed these face shields so bad that security had to like sort of escort us so that
Yeah.
we make sure that it gets into the right hands, because people were like rip them out of our hands. So it's interesting to see the whole evolution of the science fair squad. And I wanted to ask you, like through your science fair work and all that we've done together, what is the most significant and important thing you've learned from this experience? What do you think has brought you more?
Yeah, I think after competing and I think my background like in high school, as you said, like a lot of people can think I'm like the jock, right? Like no one would ever think I thought that way about science. There's always just volcanoes and whatnot. But I think on a macro scale, I realized that the experience you get, like what you can take out of the experience, is far more greater than your impressions. So you might just think it's an extracurricular activity, you need this to get grades. But I think I learned this quickly in like grade eight, and we've talked about this so many times about the true, um, I guess, experiences or opportunities you can just get by participating in this simple extracurricular activity was
Absolutely.
incredible. But I think on a micro scale, what matters most to me is that if you work on something that you're passionate about really hard through the science fair, it is way more rewarding than anything I've ever experienced. Like it can actually get you places, it can get you money or girls, whatever you're interested in. And like it's literally will get you whatever you want. If you want, I tell it to everyone, if you want money and girls, do science fair, or money and boys, you can do science fair. Um,
I actually met my girlfriend at a science fair. She was my row supervisor, and now we live together. So yeah, science fairs do bring you a lot to your life. They contribute a lot to your fulfillment. Yeah.
she's a Canada-wide science fair legend.
Yeah. So it's how, it's such a community to the point that my friends are from science fairs, my girlfriend's from science fair. And just the people that I've kept around me are people of quality that I've mostly met at science fairs. Yeah,
But besides
absolutely.
like, yeah, besides like, I totally agree with you. Like that's like the true authentic friendships that I have are definitely through science fairs. But besides like meeting like-minded individuals, what was your, I guess, biggest takeaway from this whole experience? Now being in university, you competed in science fairs for a few years. What was the biggest thing you learned, or the most important thing?
I'd say that it separates in two aspects. First, on the technical side, knowing how to express yourself and explain your opinions in a clear and concise way is one of the best things you can learn to do for yourself, because it allows you to get yourself out of a lot of situations and get yourself in a lot of opportunities. And so that's definitely something I've learned at the science fair, how to talk to different judges. Because how do you explain like rocket dynamics to a psychology major? I had a judge that was in psychology, and she was open. She was like, "Listen, I have no idea uh, about, like, I have no clue how rocket works, but try to make me understand." And going from that to a physicist, learning how to adapt your conversation depending on the person you're talking to was the first key takeaway. And on a social scale, that, like, not to make any preconcise idea of who I can be friends with. And I realized that I was keeping myself in a certain circle of friends, and finding out at the science fair all these different kids of all these different backgrounds can be as good as of a friend, like, really opened my eyes. So I would say that definitely to see that was a big takeaway, to realize that, yeah.
I totally echo that. Like looking back, there's people where I'm like, I would never hang out with these people. But also like more like growing up in high school, whether you be in like some small town or in a big city like Montreal, you're confined to a sense where you might not have people who are just like have the same interests or the same drive. And I think that's what's really cool about science fair, where everyone has like the similar drive or passion to do cool things. Um, yeah, no, I totally echo those sentiments.
Mm.
As for that's like the more professional side, but I don't think a lot of people realize the amount of shenanigans or the amount of interesting experiences or funny whack experiences that you may have encountered developing your project or at a science fair. What was like the weirdest thing, the most troubling thing you got yourself into? Like, yeah.
I mean, definitely, making, like, developing rocket fuel and rocket engines is not the safest thing to do. So I've had a few explosions, I've had a few mishaps, and I've had a few misfires. But I think that the worst part was, you can't test rockets in Quebec. The legislation is really strict. So you have to go to the States. It's actually easier to cross the border with a rocket in the backseat than to test your engineering and your science in Quebec. And so I remember crossing the United States border once with, a rocket in the backseat, and I was like, "Listen, this is not going to be fun, and you're going to hate me for this." But I got, like, basically a full-on, like, loaded rocket in the back, and he was like, "Okay, sure, let's go through it." So he pulled me to the side, and we actually had a good laugh out of it, even if I stayed at the border for like an hour. And I ended up being able to launch, and the rocket performed super well. But now every time, I'm sure there was something put into my folders. Every time I cross the border, uh, like, I get pulled on the side, and I get, like, completely searched. Even, I go ski with people that used to go ski, like, every weekend at JP, and never got pulled over. And when I'm with them, they get pulled over. So definitely, like, that was one of the weirdest experiences. And my background and my origins of my father hasn't helped. So yeah, like that was, I guess that was the funniest situation. But I know you've had a lot of ones in Abu Dhabi. You went to the Millset, so the international. Clear that up for me. Millset is what exactly?
Yeah, so Milset is the largest non-competitive science fair in the world. But yeah, no, I definitely did not transport rocket fuel across the border. Let's just get that out there. Um, yeah, no, I think more on like the science fair experience. Like people, I thought at first I would just go to like public viewing, get judged, call it a day. But I think the two weirdest things that happened to me was one in Abu Dhabi, like you said, I rode a camel with the assistant dean of science of Dawson College. Now I was in CJEP and I don't know, I thought it was the hugest flex. Just I have this like video of me, like a selfie. I missed my first ever university midterm exam riding a camel at the same exact time of my anatomy one final, and I was on a camel with the like assistant dean of science of Dawson College on the back of my camel, and I'm just like videoing myself, and I was just like sending it to all my boys back home, saying like, listen, I don't know what you guys are all doing back home, but like I'm riding a camel with the big cheese of Dawson College. Um, but I think the like you reminded me of like a border security issue where I was coming back from Taiwan literally a year ago today, February 10th, 2020. And there they gave the best over I won best overall and they gave the prize in cash, Taiwanese cash. So it was 55,000 Taiwanese dollars. And I it came with a trophy and it was in my suitcase, right? But I was overpound, so I just took the case which had the money in it that I didn't know, and I put it in my backpack. So I crossed border security, like whatever, the airport security, and they pulled me aside. I'm like, what the heck? Like I had nothing in my backpack, whatever. Pulled me aside and they're like, can we open this case? And it's like my trophy case. I cannot completely like not remembering anything. They open it and they just see cash, like bills on bills and like a giant glass like whatever, and I had to explain to them, see sir, I they thought I was like some Taiwanese drug lord. I'm like, listen sir, I just want a science fair, you see. Like it was a weird it was in San Francisco. It was really weird, considering my last name as well, like you, I have that issue as well. And so yeah, it wasn't rocket fuel, but I think those are probably the weirdest yeah,
Yeah.
the weirdest
Like
situations.
definitely the science fairs have taught us a lot, but it's also the experiences that come with it, dealing with
100%.
all of those, and being put in situations where, for the CWS, my last science fair for CWSF, I think it was 3 a.m. when I got my posters printed, and we were leaving at 5 a.m. We were taking the plane at 5. So, figuring out, like, being that lazy in that last minute and like waking up the owner of this printing shop to get him to print my posters at like 6 times the price. Like, I remember, all of those, and definitely like studying full time during science fairs is a challenge, but teaches you a lot. It's a whole story of organization and skill of being able to manage all those things, and what you get out of it is completely worth it. So definitely that's what we're trying to do with YSI. We're trying to guide people through these experiences that we've had, and even if we're now online and remote, sadly, these things are coming back, and so we want to be able to create and lead this next generation of science fair leaders. And thinking about this, most of the people that were involved in science fairs are now graduating and won't have access to science fairs anymore. And so this knowledge base is kind of gone, and this knowledge transfer is tampered with. So we're trying to, with YSI, trying to find a way to bridge that gap, and allow people to figure out how they can reinvest themselves in the science fair place without being too lost. And I'd say that my audio is off, apparently. Can you hear me?
I hear you, but I guess
Okay.
they don't hear you.
Yeah. So yeah, we're trying to, with being remote with COVID, and that's something I wanted to talk about, and how our work has changed. Actually, our work hasn't changed much because most of our work was remote of setting up this knowledge base. But our work is, I feel like, more important than before, because before, you could talk to someone a year older than you or in the same class as you to ask like how his science or her experiences were. But now you're facing a gap in the knowledge where these kids access to don't have access to this knowledge, and YSI, what we're doing is that we're making this knowledge base and creating this community so that it's self-sustaining. So our work is more important now than ever. And how it changed, however, is that our conferences won't be in person, and we had I remember you had a great space at Desjardins, the bank. They had offered to give us access to their event space, and we had funding too. But we'll simply do them remotely. But the importance that the knowledge transfer is done and supported. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think looking forward, like hopefully the next year, we'll be able to go back to in-person conferences. But I think, like you said, it's different for all of us, whether you be in science fairs or you graduated currently now. And I think for those interested, definitely check our website. We have an incubator that we're launching this summer to really take projects and turn them into companies by the end of the 12-week program. And there is funding, and the top 3 will get $25,000 in seed funding, thanks to our partnerships. And we're also starting something with called the Fellowship, which will have more information if you stay tuned later. But I think that brings us to our next point. Everything changed for us. And now we're both in university. We're not really doing science fairs anymore. And I'm getting this question a lot. How have you been able to shift your interest in COVID? I know for us it's different where we're not working on a specific science or project. It's hard for them to, you may not be able to get into a lab. But I guess the first question is, how have you shifted kind of what you're working on? I know in engineering it's different from my experiences with what I've had to do, whether it be school or in my type of research. But what would you say has been the different change for you in what you've researched during COVID? And second, what would be your advice to science fair or hackathon participants who are, now in high school doing it and now in COVID? What would you tell them?
I feel like most of the work that has to be done in engineering is theoretical initially. So there's a lot of modeling and simulation to do if you want to save costs. For example, with my friends, we're developing a drone UAV company to try to remotely develop higher accuracy infrastructure maintenance solutions. And most of that work, that autonomous development, that drone design is remote. Is something that is done that is completely virtual. The simulations, the fluid dynamics, and all that analysis is done on your computer. So there is an immense quantity of work you can do remotely that you don't require to build something for. And so I feel like a lot of science fair people could go and target that work, that more theoretical work, that is the underlying foundation to a lot of physical projects in the end. So definitely, and I'm actually mentoring a couple of science fair projects right now, and one is based in that theoretical work of quantum computing. So yes, it is maybe more difficult to get a project on the road, but it's not impossible, and it's definitely not the lack of subjects that's the problem here, or the lack of work to be done. There's a lot of problems in the world that can be absolutely solved with work, with your theoretical and analysis and simulation work. So I'd recommend doing that, definitely. Did you have like something equivalent in health sciences that you?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely more difficult. I'm always honest. My engineering, I guess, skills are not, the best. I don't really like particularly the engineering side of things. But unlike coding or I guess engineering theoretical projects, the medical science biochem side needs a lab most often. I think that's what a lot of kids have struggled with if they have always done these types of projects, which is what I've done. And I was thinking about it last year. If I had a science fair project to do, I would be lost. But I think there are different clever ways that have yet to be tapped into in these fields. When I was in grade 10, I worked on designing this diagnostic strip for bladder cancer. And the whole first half of this project was theoretical online using databases and CBI Blast. And I think there are different ways. And I know for YSI, we're planning a workshop on how to actually build a diagnostic test for a specific disease that you're interested in using this thing. So if you're interested, definitely check that out coming up. But I think there are different avenues that you can explore. It's a lot more difficult than the engineering, coding, like comp sci type projects out there, but it's definitely doable, 100%. And I think the clever ways you're able to have that happen will definitely get you far in like these competitions. But you know, slowly things are slowly opening up, and I think we can look forward to that. Especially considering the next, you know, science fair project, like science fair competition, are in a year. But definitely, I would totally like we all have way more free time now. I guess if you were in high school, I know us is different in school, but even in university and in high school, like we do have more free time, which allows us to work on more of our side projects. And I think that's what you and I have benefited the most out of COVID.
Yeah.
But I think there's no better time than to learn coding or pick up these new kind of skills that can help you with a cool science fair project. So that's definitely what I would suggest. Yeah.
And there's a there's proof, there's historical proof that periods like these where people are left with themselves to figure out what they want or what they should do in periods of change is when we progress the most. Most of the most successful startup companies today started in 2008 during the financial crisis. If you think of PayPal, if you think of Uber, like brands that are today omnipresent in our lives started into these difficult moments. So I'd say that moments like these are difficult, but not negative in the sense that they allow us to develop things that we would have maybe not had a chance to think about or develop on our own. And now we have the time and we have the energy and will to do it because we're stuck at home and we're bored. So I feel like it's even a better time than ever to work on these projects.
Like I say during my procrastination of assignments, diamonds are made under pressure. I think that's if COVID has taught us anything, and I think we experienced that firsthand. At least me with the ventilator project we did, we built a ventilator in 2 weeks. Like that's pretty insane. Like I knew nothing about engineering, but I learned a lot working with you, and definitely I think you learned a lot about the pulmonary system, and I think we taught. It was an interesting time, and dealing with time constraints and different I guess stressors. That was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
wanted to ask you, now that you're involved, in the sphere of STEM and trying to make a change and enable this new generation of science fair people to progress and win this 25 grand incubator prize that we're setting up. What is something you'd like to know before, if you would have loved to know before getting into this field? What is something that would have contributed to making you more efficient in working in this environment?
I think it's two things. One being really in high school, 100%. Exposing yourself to a bunch of different things, whether it be comp sci, whether it be engineering, whether it be the biological thing. I know a lot of us stick to the things we're comfortable in, or we're just like lazy. We don't really care for it, or we just don't know what it'll bring to us. I know when I talk to a lot of our friends about, they see us doing all these cool things and they're like, oh, I wish I knew. I would have maybe tried in science fairs. I wish I knew about science fairs. I think for me, I was lucky where I really like tried a bunch of things, saw what I hated, saw what I liked. Um, I went to Shad and got an internship at Nuance Communications. They made Siri, an Apple bought Siri off of them, and I was put as a technical manager in this comp sci machine learning area. I knew nothing about this, and I tried it. It was a fun experience. No, I can now say I was a manager at 15 years old, but I hated comp sci. That's what I realized, at least like that aspect of what they were doing. Although it was really interesting, it wasn't my thing. I like biochem type stuff more, and I think that's one major thing of really exposing yourself. And I think the second thing is, um, I guess it's cliche, but not being afraid to, I guess, fail in continuing a project. I think it takes I really think to be a great scientist, it takes two things. One, the relentless nature to make something work, and the perseverance to make this world a better place, the wanting to make this world a better place. And I think people don't realize that you can do that while still in high school, while in CJUP, while in university, and not wait until you get some comfy job. I mean, look at Cyril. He's building rockets, transporting it through the borders, like it's nothing. You know what I'm saying? So I think those are the two things that I learned. And whenever my friends are like, "Oh, I wish I knew about this. I wish I knew about science fairs," like there's really no better time than now. And look, we all have so much free time now with COVID. Um, you may feel lost, you may not know what to do, but there's really no better time to just get started. And I think we've done that. We've just started things during COVID, and I really don't see there being any barrier right now to start. So yeah.
Absolutely.
What about you? What's
Absolutely.
the one thing you wish, I guess, you knew before going into all this?
You're gonna laugh, but it's actually the contrary of you. So you would have wished to invest yourself more into more things and try more things out because you've said through your experience of working at that comp sci company, even if you're not a comp sci guy, you've learned a great deal. My problem was that I was everywhere at the same time and I was trying to do too many things. I was considering a career into law, I was considering a career into engineering, I was considering a career in rhetoric. So too many things at the same time is not as efficient as focusing on one path, one trajectory. And if I could give advice on, how to something to know before you get involved in STEM is to figure out first what you want, what you like. And you can do that by trying multiple things, but don't invest yourself too much in so many things that you're spread out too thin, because then you don't get the advantage of being efficient in that field. And I was close to a burnout a couple years ago because I was just doing too many things. And you have to know what your priorities are, and that's why I have this board behind me. That this big whiteboard is like my list of what I want to make, what I want to do, and where I'm headed. And that's basically the most precious thing I have in here. It's like my master plan. And if I lose that, I lose my direction, and I don't know how to prioritize myself first. So definitely try to figure out what you want and who you are, and that allows you to invest yourself in a way that's more efficient towards your objectives.
I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. You brought up a really good point. I guess like in high school and university, it's becoming more common for burnout, and it's really, it says a lot about our generation. Where one, we're having a lot of far-fetching dreamers and relentless thinkers, but it can also be dangerous and also be a curse. But I think I mean, I don't know. We've always talked about it, like finding a balance of the two things, but I really think it's priceless to meander and find the things you're passionate about early on in your career um, of change making, I would say, in high school and university, instead of, graduating, getting some comfy job and realizing in your 40s it's not what you want to do, but really finding what you're passionate about early on and compounding that knowledge for the next so many years. So I think it's a really good point what you said in terms of finding something you really like and just taking it to the end, what you're really passionate about. I think that's where we're kind of leading in terms of universities and selection boards. We're seeing a bunch of people always try to check off all these imaginary boxes, do this, do that, join a sports team, join student government, MUN, all this stuff. But I think right now what we're seeing like in medical schools or top graduate programs, they're seeing people who they really want to see people who have a personal connection to a problem, who are really passionate about something and took it to the end. You're so passionate about aerospace engineering, and now you're working on incredible projects with like the CSA and all these big companies who are actually having change and facilitating this change. And I think that's why you're so like, you inspire me and so many other people. Like for me, I was inspired to work on Alzheimer's when my grandfather was diagnosed with vascular dementia. I think all these interesting antidotes are what drive a lot of you and I and all our friends in the science fair space. And um, yeah, no, that's why I'm really hopeful for like our generation. I know the world is pretty crappy right now, but yeah, no, I think it was definitely
I,
well said what you said.
I definitely feel like we need a lot of dreamers, and that's something that we're missing as a culture in Canada, and that is maybe more more brought up in the States is the talent of a person instead of their experience. And that I've had to face a lot in aerospace because it's a very like experience-based industry. And that's what we're facing and we're seeing in science fairs, that you have this tremendous amount of talent that is now capitalized on, and all these projects that are developed and then, you know, left to the side to rot. And like, how many of your friends have started science fair projects that never ended up anywhere, even if they had amazing potential? And I feel like that's kind of where, you know, YSI comes in, is by discovering talent in you know, science fair people and in their projects, and the projects allow us to, you know, make an interview without even talking to the person. We know the quality of their work, you know, how much they can invest of their own time and headspace, and it gives you an idea, you know, of the amount of talent that we have in Canada. And from there, trying to grow this talent into experience is the challenge that we try to face and we try to solve and bridge at YSI. And I think that definitely in the future, this change in university boards that you're talking about and admissions boards is being seen in initiatives like YSI, where talent is seen as important as experience. And that is true, because if someone is not passionate enough to have developed skills on the side that will, you know, facilitate this experience, it'll be difficult to enable higher level opportunities. So I'm happy to be part of this. I'm happy to be contributing to this experience. And if we can get a first good class of YSI graduates and allow to this 25 grand in seed funding to being reinvested in a way that can sustain these projects and develop expertise within talent in Canada, that would make my year. Definitely, that would make all this work worth it.
I think the same goes for me. And I think that kind of brings me to, I guess, our last point, because we don't want to drag this on too long. I think if you're watching this, and I think, if I don't want to put words in Cyril's mouth, but I think what you and I benefited most in our experiences, and why I think we're successful in a sense, is our ability to communicate. Not in the general like way of just saying communication is key, but I think the work of great science is not completed until communicated with empathy and compassion. And I think this is so apparent with the work, and just listening to your first science fair project to hearing you on stages. I think this is the key, if you to just starting off projects, or to getting far, or to getting to university admissions. I think until being able to communicate, you touched upon it before, if you can communicate your idea to a 5-year-old and a Nobel laureate. I had that struggle at ISAF when I went. I had a judge, like a Nobel laureate and a 5-year-old in public viewing, asking about my project. So I can go into depth and like with this PhD world-renowned guy. The junior over here, buddy, I gotta tell him, like, you know, you can pee out Alzheimer's of my project. But that's like a very basic point. I think like being able to communicate with empathy, with being a human first, this is the future of science. And to be a future great scientist or change maker or STEM innovator, whatever, you need to communicate. I think we're seeing it it's such a big problem in today's world, where we saw down south with our neighbors, you know, with science not being held to the highest regard with respect. It really it affects all, I guess, facets of society. Then you look at Scandinavian countries, when science is held to a highest regard with respect. You look at countries in Taiwan. When I was there, I met the vice president. He's a doctor, a medical doctor. And even the president of Taiwan is a doctor. And look at them. They're the world leaders in controlling COVID. I think because they get it. They get communicating science. And I think that's something I admire about you, with your ability to communicate with people. Not only communicating science, but also knowing the difference of when to put science to the side and just talking to them as a person. I think you do an incredible job with it. And I think if you're watching this, that's like something you should focus on. I think that's something we both work on all the time. At least I do. That's I put so much emphasis on that in my work. I think in starting out right now, amongst all the things we've talked about, in my opinion, that's one of the most important things, of just really communicating with empathy and compassion, and you know that'll get you places.
Absolutely, because you don't want to build a generation of scientific leaders that are heartless, because what's the point of science if you don't employ it to the benefit of humanity? You want to find a way to convey that scientific knowledge in a way that is benefiting humanity, and you can only do this in an efficient way if you understand, if you understand humanity itself. So by knowing how to communicate as a human and as a person, and of the best brains we've had on earth, that is a common trait I've seen in all of them, is this ability to communicate on a one-on-one human level. And so I hope that I hope that at YSI we can try to do something similar, where we can invest and support brains to develop not as great scientific leaders but also as great humans. Really.
As Ronnie Zach says in the chat, preach. And Sean Deep saying, Cyril is a master communicator. I completely agree with you, sir. I completely agree. So honestly, I feel like we can go on and on forever, but we're gonna have to cut it cuts. We got some assignments. You're an aerospace engineer in the making, but I think we definitely need a live session of just talking about the most absurd things we've seen through science fairs, whether it be I'm not even gonna go into it, but literally comment if you have any people that you're interested in. Definitely register for our conference on our website and the link in our bio. We're gonna have some amazing speakers, Tasni and Nabil, who's really revolutionizing for that matter, nanoparticle drug delivery, and Mr. Brian Wu, who I met him at ISF. He found planets with 2 suns, like Tatooine type stuff, bro. Like that's crazy. This man also did a legendary dab in the award ceremony with thousands of people, and this guy's just doing dabs, and he's a legend. And he's gonna have a fireside chat with Cyril on March 7th, a Sunday. Lucky for you, that's the last day of my March break. I hope it's the last day of your March break. So that's gonna be fun, but definitely we're gonna have this every week with really cool people, cooler than me. So you're gonna hear like from other people on our team and a bunch of inspiring people that I think we're friends with pretty cool people. We're gonna have some dope people on. So thank you for listening. I hope everyone has a good, safe, and healthy rest of your evening, and you have 11 minutes till curfew is done if you're here in Quebec. So get home if you're watching this. But no, this was really fun. I really enjoyed this, and yeah, till next week.
Yeah, excited to see where YSI is going to bring us and a lot of people.
All right, take care, everyone. Take care,
Take
Cyril.
care. Ciao.